So, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Andy Urez. I'm the Regional Vice President for UK and Ireland for Celonis, and I'm delighted that we're joined today by AstraZeneca on the subject why process mining is the catalyst for their digital transformation. Allow me to introduce Bronwyn Morell, who is going to take you through her journey with process mining so far.
Thanks, Andy, for the introduction. Yes, so I'm a process mining capability lead at AstraZeneca, and this is a newly created role because AstraZeneca, we're starting to see how important process mining is going to be to take us on that digital transformation journey.
Great. So why don't we just start with a little bit of background on AstraZeneca, please, Bronwyn.
So AstraZeneca is a global pharmaceutical company. We employ just over 64,000 employees, and we have 30 sites in just over 17 countries. After 6 years of falling revenue, 2018 was the year that we returned to product sales growth. We invested $5.9 billion in research and development, and we ended the year strong with 149 projects in clinical development and 23 major regional approvals. Our focus continues to be on the growth of product sales and the generation of cash so that we have a financially strong company to sustain further investment in research and development. Now, in order to do this, we need our processes to be fast, smart, and simple. We need to drive out inefficiencies from our processes, releasing cash and freeing up time for value-add activities. We need to start adopting new technologies to make us smarter in the way that we are interacting with our customers, our suppliers, and our employees. And we also need to start harmonizing our financial processes globally, making them simpler to operate and easier to scale.
Thank you. Very interesting. So we recently commissioned a study and 45% of the executives fed back to us that they don't know where to start when developing their own transformation strategies. So could you please give us a bit of background on how did AstraZeneca as an organization approach the discovery and transformation of their processes?
It's been very interesting to watch this journey unfold at AstraZeneca, and it's also been great to play such a pivotal role in shaping how AstraZeneca as an organization can more intelligently approach the discovery and transformation of their processes. The advanced analytics is a big agenda item at the moment, and it was clear that we could be smarter about the way in which we leverage our process data. What we were starting to do was think about how we could use machine learning to prescribe corrective action to prevent undesirable process outcomes. And actually, when I joined AstraZeneca as a data scientist in 2017, the first question I was asked was if I could build a model to predict the late payment of vendor invoices. We could then use this model to trigger appropriate action to prevent late payment. And when I plowed headfirst in trying to build this model, what I started to discover was that most of the information we had around what causes late payment of invoices was anecdotal, which is not great for building a predictive model. And even measuring late payments globally was a challenge because we have such a huge systems landscape supporting the payment process. We actually have 8 SAP systems, 8 Ariba instances, and 2 bespoke IT systems. And process analytics initiatives were never quite getting off the ground because they always required an IT project with a large budget to extract and transform the relevant data. And people were frustrated with this lack of data-led process transparency. Whilst everyone was talking about big data, business intelligence, and advanced analytics, here we were still stuck in the traditional approach of analyzing our processes, which is one-off reports, workshops, opinions, process maps, more workshops. And what I quickly realized was that a predictive model of late invoice payments was not the place to start. We needed to take a step back and create this process transparency first.
Interesting. And looking at that traditional approach, what kind of things did that involve?
So typically what you do with a traditional approach is you start off with your reports. And typically what you would do is you would define your scope up front, because extracting all that data to do a thorough analytical investigation, like I said, requires this formal IT project with budget. So what we'll do is we'll generate reports, and we'll start to look at maybe which vendors we're paying late. We'll start to look at how late we might be paying them, and this gives us a good idea of how big the problem is. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll step into workshops. Okay, and we'll start to discuss how the process works. We'll discuss scenarios that are causing all the pain points in our process, and we'll come up with some ideas of how to fix the project, fix the process, and we might even spin up some IT projects along the way to start measuring the impact of these changes that we're making. But typically what we find, and like that's what I'm trying to show on this slide, is that we don't expect the scale of improvement that we're after. Right.
Thank you. So oftentimes business transformations are in fact derailed by a lack of direction we find in the market. And from our experience, this is usually due to not knowing what the state of the operations are actually in. Businesses tend to skip square one and plow ahead without actually knowing exactly what they're trying to fix. What's your experience in this?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're trying to address, because the problem with workshops is that you can't bring everyone into the room, and with this approach you never get all the information that you need about everything that's actually going on in your organization. But actually most of our business processes operate with the help of IT systems. You've got SAP, ServiceNow, Salesforce, Workday. There are hundreds of IT systems supporting hundreds of business processes that run across AstraZeneca. And actually most of these IT systems contain detailed log files, which are recording every single activity that occurs in every corner of our organization. So you start to ask yourself, well, what if I could bring all the information into the room? What if I can start to tap into these log files and create a digital representation of the end-to-end business process? What if we can display this digital representation of the business process in such a way that it's really easy to visualize and interpret? And what if I can make this digital representation of the process available to an analyst such that he has all this process data available at his fingertips, and he can pull together any numbers required during the workshop to start moving the discussions in the right direction? We start to replace these opinion-based discussions with data-led discussions, and we start to significantly reduce the time it takes to reach the correct conclusions. We're becoming smart in the way that we're leveraging the vast quantities of process data that's generated every second of the day. So we move from this traditional workshop and opinion-based approach, where we never quite seeing the scale of improvement we're after, to this. And really, this is what process mining is all about.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bronwyn. So how did you first hear about process mining?
So I was given a demonstration of Celonis at the beginning of 2017, and I was very impressed with the package overall. So we did look at other process mining vendors, but where Celonis stands out is their support for the process mining ecosystem as a whole, because actually there are quite a lot of component parts that are required to get a process mining capability established. There's a data acquisition, there's a process mining algorithms, there's a way in which you analyze your process data, and there's also the presentation layer to start sharing your insights with a wider audience. And what we felt is that Celonis had a really good support for this ecosystem as a whole. Also, Celonis has a large presence in the pharma industry, and this was very attractive for us since it creates opportunities to discuss potential use cases within the industry. So I decided to approach my key finance stakeholder at the time to ask if he would support a proof of concept with Celonis. And with advanced analytics playing a pivotal role in our digital transformation strategy, this was a quick sell.
Perfect. Well, I guess as with most businesses, prior to any investment, you've had to go through a business/ROI kind of process. Was this the case with process mining, and how did you justify it to your finance stakeholders?
Yeah, so yes, of course, this was the case for us, and without the proof of concept, it would have been very difficult to build out this business case. So what we did was we spent a week with two of your colleagues from Celonis. We spent a week with them, and we did a proof of concept. So we did this in November 2017, and we chose to mine the contract to cash process. What we also did was we strategically chose 3 markets, each with very different operating models, and also with data that was sitting across 2 of our SAP systems. This proof of concept was essential for stakeholder buy-in, because what it demonstrated was that we could connect to multiple IT systems. So we could create this end-to-end business view, moving us away from these isolated systems views, which most people would identify with. It also showed us how very quickly we could analyze 3 very different operating models without the need for any workshops. In that week that we were sitting with our data connected to Celonis, we could understand how each of those markets were operating. Right? We could just see that from the data alone. And so within 1 week, we had identified approximately $300,000 of both operational and working capital savings. And off the back of this, we were able to develop our business case to purchase and deploy Celonis across the key finance processes, contract to cash, and purchase to pay. And we presented this business case to our group CFO, and it was approved at the end of December 2017.
Perfect, thank you. So from your perspective, what were the key examples of business impact, So
it is often at this point where people start to ask me, well, now that you've got Celonis deployed, what kind of benefits are you seeing? But what I'd like to do first, Andy, if it's okay, is just talk about our operating model, because actually once you've got Celonis deployed, all you've done at that point is deliver fast and smart access to process data in a way that's easy to interpret and analyze. You haven't actually delivered any process improvements, but you have delivered an improvement to the way in which you're analyzing your process data.
Makes sense.
And the savings to that shouldn't be underestimated. But when we look at our finance processes, whilst we as a process mining team can start churning out all these interesting insights, how do we prioritize the insights that we act on? And who's responsible for converting the insights into action? So at AstraZeneca, we have global process owners for both contract to cash and purchase to pay. And this immediately makes it much easier for us. Our team works very closely with the global process owners and their respective teams to produce analysis which will support initiatives on the roadmap. So our process owners are driving our priorities as a process mining center of excellence. But at the same time, our team is working with the process data daily, which means we often see some interesting process dynamics which are worth sharing with our process owners and might influence their priorities. We also have more technical competency within our team, so we can start exploring the art of the possible, because once you have Celonis deployed, it becomes feasible to augment your platform with other advanced analytics techniques to enable more automation, prescribe corrective action, or suggest strategies for decision makers. And so what we're trying to do is set up our team with both this reactive and proactive capacity.
So cool. So how I guess questions 2-part here. How initially did IT fit in with this, and how does IT fit in with this now, Bronwyn?
So actually, I started in IT. Right, so I started as a data scientist in IT, and actually I was a very frustrated data scientist because I never had access to all the process data that I needed to solve the kinds of questions that I was being posed. And And also within IT, I was working in an analytics function within IT, and I was working very closely with the business, right? So last year, I still was in IT because the focus of process mining at that point was really on the IT deployment and getting this implemented. But now we're shifting into a different phase where our IT deployment is behind us, and now what we're doing is trying to support the business and improving their processes. So I'm actually now sitting in global business services,
right?
Working with finance, who's a key customer. I sit within an advanced analytics practice within global business services. So we still very much rely on the support of IT, because without IT, this whole platform couldn't work. But at least my focus now is much more business facing. How do we use the data to improve our business operations?
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to ask that dreaded question yet again. So value, could you give us some key examples of business impact from your perspective?
Yeah, so working capital is a key priority for our global process owners this year and is driving most of our focus. And because of the technology stack behind Celonis and the process models we've developed, this is the first time we've had all 8 SAP instances connected to a single dashboard, which is making it incredibly easy for the business to adopt a standardized approach to analyzing the payment terms for our vendors. We have 81 global users accessing this analysis, and they're using this dashboard to drive discussions with vendors, which are going to have the most impact on our working capital. We've changed 1,400 vendors to standard terms, which means we're no longer paying these vendors early, and we're on track to realizing a rather significant working capital target for the year.
Thank you.
So, but what's really interesting about Celonis is that not only can we look at payment terms, we can also use Celonis to look at how our vendors are being created and how our purchase orders are being created, right? So within our dashboard, every time a vendor is created, if they're created on non-standard terms, we can immediately flag this as a non-compliance to our payment terms policy, and we've got key people in place to address this. We also noticed that for some vendors whose payment terms had already been changed, we were still seeing new purchase orders come through with the old payment terms. So what we did was we looked at the underlying behavior around creating purchase orders. And from the data, it was immediately obvious that people were going into the system, taking an old purchase order, they were copying it, and the new vendor terms weren't being reflected on that copied PO.
Okay, understood.
So what we're doing is a system review to either disable this functionality or make sure that the new vendor terms are reflected on the new purchase order. And for me, this is really where Celonis stands out, because you start with a dashboard of payment terms, which on the face of it does look like a lot of the dashboards that most people are familiar with in Tableau, Power BI, and ClickView. But the difference is that our dashboard is not connected to the data tables required to analyze payment terms. It's connected to a process model which contains a data point for every single activity which has occurred on every single purchase order and every single vendor invoice that has been processed within AstraZeneca. And so within a single platform, what we can do is immediately drill down into the underlying behavior which is influencing the metrics we see on that top level dashboard. And again, I think this is a great example of how Celonis, another great example of how Celonis differs from a traditional reporting platform. Because at the beginning of the talk, you'll remember that we had a big focus on paying our vendors on time. So I talked about how when I joined AstraZeneca as a data scientist, I was asked to build a dashboard. I was asked to build a predictive model which would help us prevent late payment of our vendor invoices. And we were also creating a dashboard which would monitor our payment to terms rates globally. And now when you connect Celonis to your process, one of the first things that you can do is look at the manual intervention taking place across the process. And so what you typically do is you look at all those activities which were executed by a person, and you'll sort this list of activities in order of descending frequency. And one such activity that we noticed was the change to baseline dates. And we also noticed that this was concentrated in a region where historically payment to terms was pretty poor.
Okay.
And when we looked at how this manual intervention in the process had developed over time, well, surprise, surprise, with this change to the baseline date, which affects when you pay your invoice, had started to increase when we started to monitor our payment to terms rate globally, right? So actually on a high level view, the payment to terms rate in this region was improving, but actually all we've done was introduce some undesired behavior into the process. So you shouldn't be going in and changing the baseline date to make sure that you're paying your invoice on time. And as it transpires, when we investigated this, it was because most of these invoices were due on a weekend, right? And so what was happening was that the payment run wasn't picking these up on the Friday, and so that we weren't paying these invoices on time. So what we're starting to do is drive out this undesired behavior from our process and rather fix the underlying systems, which make sure that an invoice never falls, and at the due date of an invoice never falls on the weekend.
Makes a lot of sense actually, because you tend to think about manual intervention, RPA, but this is totally different. It's about altering the back office systems to improve and make that process more efficient. So from a looking ahead perspective, Bronwyn, obviously you've done some great work in the finance area. Where else are you looking to go with Celonis and process mining, please?
Yes, so our focus is still very much finance at this stage, but there are opportunities that exist across the whole organization, because of course any business process supported by an IT system is potentially in scope. So we're talking to supply chain, we're also talking to our colleagues in HR about modeling our recruitment processes, and we're also working with our IT colleagues to see how we could support the consolidation of our vast SAP systems landscape.
Sorry, no, that's perfect. Thank you, Bronwyn. I'd like to say thank you for your time thus far and taking the time to talk us through your exciting journey with AstraZeneca. And clearly, we're very much looking forward to continuing this partnership with you. I'd like to turn to potentially a couple of questions if we have any at this stage. Yes, I can see one popping up immediately. We struggle to get the necessary exposure and focus in order to drive similar initiatives to AstraZeneca. Which department do you work in and who was your sponsor?
Yes, so currently I'm based in our Global Business Services department, and as I mentioned, I'm based in our Advanced Analytics team. And finance is one of our customers, but like I mentioned, actually I was previously based in IT, which is where this initiative was born. So I think what you'll find is that there is a little bit of a combination of both IT and business that need to work together to drive this kind of initiative. But really, our key sponsor was finance, and like I said, we're starting with our finance processes, order to cash, and purchase to pay. But we would very much like to start working with the broader business.
Thank you. I'm just scanning through these. Very similar question there. So we have multiple bespoke systems across various geographies. Could process mining technology like Celonis work with us?
Yes, we connected to 23 physical IT systems using a combination of 5 different technologies. So we've got a direct connection into SAP using SLT. We're also using API technology to pull data down from our cloud-based Ariba installation. And then we've also got a SharePoint system, which processes some of our non-purchase order-based invoices. And actually, what we've got there are just some, it generates. We've got something generating CSV files, and we've got a simple Python script, uploading that into our database. So really, you can connect to absolutely any type of system as long as the data exists in a way that gives you that history of change, which has occurred across the process. You can connect to that system and immediately start to exploit it to drive business insights.
Cool, thank you. So I'm looking at this question here. I'm going to paraphrase. So a lot of the activities that they've been focused on are very specific to parts of processes as I'm reading it. How did you look at an end-to-end process other than just this says accounts payable here? How do you look at a broader process across silos and different departments? Is that something you've experienced when working in the AstraZeneca environment?
Yeah, well, I mean, finance. So finance is really, really broad, right? So when you look at the purchase to pay process, you're looking at those initial contracts that we establish with vendors. You're also looking at master data management. You're then looking at the purchase order process, the procurement process, and then you're looking at the invoice process. So what you can do is really with process mining is you can choose any perspective that you'd like, right? So if you want to look at something from the perspective of a vendor, then we can see exactly how that vendor has been created on our system, how many times we're making changes to the master data on that vendor, and how we are interacting with that vendor, and how we're receiving invoices from them. So really what you can start to do is look at that end-to-end process, which is touching all of our departments which are dealing with vendors, which is both procurement and finance.
Perfect. Risky one here. It just says lessons learned ?
Probably our biggest lesson learned was that we probably underestimated the IT effort to get Celonis deployed, right? So from the proof of concept to where we are today took much longer than we would have liked, right? I know that Celonis has been actively working to overcome some of these IT challenges because they now have this intelligent business cloud,
That's
which
right.
I think it makes it a lot easier. And I almost wish that that had been available when we started.
Well, we can take that offline, Bronwyn, obviously, no problem.
But I think the biggest lesson learned is don't lose heart, because there are going to be some challenges getting data into your platform. I think every organization will say that from getting access to your data is usually the biggest challenge. But once you can overcome that, it really the benefits are just huge. And what we're really starting to see is now that the IT deployment project is behind us, we're starting to see this huge uptake on our platform. So from 3 months ago to now, we've gone from 20 users accessing our platform to 160 users accessing our platform. And so we're really starting to see almost this like exponential growth now that we've got this process data connected. Just keep going.
Get it, thank you. So does it do more than discovery?
Yeah, so I guess discovering is that first part, right? Once you connect Celonis, it's your data, you can see this amazing process view, and you start to see things that you didn't really even know were happening in your organization. But not only can you start to discover, you can start to track and monitor, right? And then, like I said, what you can then start to do is augment even more advanced analytics techniques to your platform so that you can start building predictive models. It's almost like a data scientist playground, right? You can start really doing clever stuff with your process data. So process discovery is that first part,
right?
But then past that, there's so much more that you can do with the platform.
And are there any examples where, I know you touched on a few earlier, but driving change, clearly there's that discovery piece that this gentleman's alluding to, and then there's that monitoring capability, but what about the change?
Yeah, so what we're starting to see is a lot of uptake from our operations teams. So what they're starting to do with Celonis is use it as a digital huddle board. So on a daily basis, start to have a look at the problems which happened yesterday. How much manual intervention was in the process yesterday, and starting to really drive that change from the ground up.
Great stuff. I think I'll call it a day. Thank you again, Bronwyn, on the questions. So finally, I'd like to thank you all for joining in the webinar, and also for those questions. Much appreciated. As a final call to action, if Celonis is of interest, clearly you can get in contact through our website. But more importantly, feel free to go and look at the Celonis Snap capability and get using Celonis right now. Thank you all for attending.